Okay, the first video was a little bit of the warm up on the talk about sin. So this is what I've learned in my experience about sin. Because my sins have revolved around sexual self control and sexual restraint. I grew up in a home where people were loud when it came to sex. I mean, headboard against the wall, bang, 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 bang. People screaming, "Oh my God!" And then people saying, "Yeah, I'm that kind of ninja. I'm that kind of ninja. Yeah, yeah." And people walking around after they had sex butt naked. I remember this one time, my mom's John at the time, after they had a loud, ruckus, bedboard wall banging session that seemed to have gone on for more than an hour, that ended in the crescendo. Like minutes after that, he opened the door, came out of the door butt naked, ding dong swinging as he walked down the stairs. My sister and I sitting at the bottom of the stairs because we couldn't help but hear what was happening. We actually came out of our rooms, which were upstairs, a little bit away from my mom's room, and came downstairs to kind of get away from it. I mean, and so what I'm saying there, and then my aunts, and so the women in my family and the men and the men around us didn't practice discretion. They didn't treat sex as something sacred. It was just sport and fun and pleasure. So I grew up in that environment, and my first exposure to sex was in my mom's room, and I found a novel called Candy. One of the literary classics in pornography literature. And I say that because that's exactly what it is. It was the first of its kind as far as explicit pornographic, what do you want to say? When something is sold and everyone gets it. I don't think it was a bestseller, but it was a crossover novel. And then not soon after that, I found Penthouse magazines in my mom's bedroom. And I was around the age of 12 years old. So that was my introduction to sex. And it was also around the time that I started to engage in masturbation. No one told me about the birds and the bees. I never had a sex talk about birds and bees. I just I understood body parts. I understood how they connected, and then not long after that, that curiosity led me into mature movies, R-rated movies, and I am not ashamed to say this because it's a part of my growth. I was sneaking in. I was so curious about sex, and so and it wasn't just the pleasurable part, but it was the information part. I was just intrigued about how two people's bodies got together and then created pleasure. And so for me, I was sneaking into adult theaters at around the age of at the age of 13. And so in many kind of ways, I wouldn't have said I was perverted. I would have said I was a teenager having an excessive abnormal curiosity about sex because of my early exposure to it. And so from there, I would go to libraries and I would read. I would go into sections of the library where very few people went, and I would get books about sex, Masters and Johnson's books, anatomy books. And I mean, I really studied about human anatomy. I studied the male body and I studied about the female body because I was so curious. And I've always been a curious person. I've always been a well-read person. I've always been someone who, when they got a bite on something, they just dove into it. And interestingly enough, I came into relationship with Jesus right around that same time. So that, my relationship with the Lord, and the particular challenge that I faced, the sin, masturbation and pornography pretty much was something that I warred against all my life. And for me, that sin was a weight, it was a challenge, it was a beast. It was something that overcame me and overwhelmed me, and yet I struggled against it because I wanted to model and exemplify and embody the attitudes, the characteristics, the mannerisms, and the demeanor of being like Jesus. I never had the thought of being Christ-like when I first came in. I just wanted to be like Jesus. I got a hold of the Bible and I dove into the Bible with the same kind of gusto, veracity, and intensity that I dove into my study of human anatomy, biology, sense, sexuality. And I got such a clear image of who Jesus was, and he was actually one of my first superheroes, because I had other superheroes. I was into comic books as well, but Jesus was like a superhero to me. He could walk on water, he could heal people, he could fly at the end of his life, and he had power over demons. And so Jesus was real to me when I read the Bible. And then the first time I met him was in a dream, a very intense, a very vivid dream, which today I recognize was a vision in a dream. And I saw him in all of his, he was 6 foot, built out, muscular, dark brown hair, gray, olive green eyes, skin toned, not white, but kind of olive and brown, beard, mustache, very intense eyes, thick eyebrows, very powerful, strong neck, broad shoulders, heavily built hands. I mean, I could see beneath the robes that he was packing some muscle. I mean, and so I was very impressed. Not to get too far away from the topic of sin, but because he came to me and because I had idealized him as a superhero and he was so real to me, I experienced relationship with him. I experienced instantaneous transmissions of thoughts and insights and wisdoms, but none of that stuff I could share in my religious church. I never told anyone that I saw Jesus in a dream, and I never told anyone that portrait that they had hanging up on the wall, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, that wasn't Jesus. From my dream, I knew that was not Jesus, but I didn't get into the issue of conflict or becoming superly bothered by the portrait. I just saw it up there and it was like, okay, that's not him. And then I just moved on to other things. What I'm saying here is when you have a religious mindset versus a relationship mindset, as I got more into the relationship, which took years, I mean, we're talking decades, as I shifted more and more and gotten deeper into the relationship mindset, my focus on sin and my attention to sin lessened because I became more interested in building the relationship. And in that sense, I started looking more at communication. I started focusing more on fasting, and I started putting the emphasis on reading and studying and meditating. And so when I started to put my energy into those kinds of things, building out those kinds of things, I became less bothered when I had the occasional fall, when I had the occasional slip. I became less burdened by it. I felt less guilt and shame by it. And I know that sounds kind of weird to say, to not have sin or shame about sin, but I just didn't. I didn't have shame about sin. What I had was determination to get back up and then get back into those steps and strategies and tools that had kept me strong and kept me moving forward and kept me getting closer to him. And that's what I mean by the difference between the religious mindset when it comes to sin and the relationship mindset. You don't focus on the sin as a problem. You really just see the sin as showing you where you are, and then you focus on the underlying areas where you have let something lapse or where you are weak, and you build up those things. So you're not focused on sin as it's going to pull you away. You focus on sin as it's going to show you what you need to do better to get closer to him. Relationship over religion. Peace.